Bosses of Reddit, what did your new employee do that made you instantly regret hiring them? They were loudly taking a phone call while waiting to be interviewed. Taking a call is not a total deal breaker by itself. But the call was her coaching the friend into getting fired so she could get unemployment. I didn't hire her, but after I left I think someone else did. I hope my former boss doesn't comment about his employee that made 2 espressos when someone asked for a double espresso. I regret being myself, guys, I'm sorry. She stapled papers in the middle of the page, like as far as she could reach with the stapler. I feel like right now I'm that new employee. Day 1 relative died. Delayed my start by 2 days. Day 5 husband of relative died, was offered compassionate leave. Day 13 girlfriend fell down the stairs and needed to go to hospital. Day 15 I had a pre-booked holiday. Another day off. Day 16 GF's passport stolen in another country. Missed our train home. Weather prevented us traveling that entire day. Day 17 arrived 2 hours late after having to travel across Europe before work. Day 36 boiler explodes during the night and need to sit around for an emergency plumber who then takes all day to fix it. I really swear it's all the bad luck at once, but even I know it sounds so unrealistically far-fetched at this point. Couldn't figure out how to log into email with step-by-step directions on the first day. Needed step-by-step directions every day for everything on the computer. Day 3, did you double click Outlook icon? Him. Oh yeah. Now what do I do? Me. Type in your password. Him. What's my password? Me. You picked your password the first day. That's why it's called a password. Only you know it. Him. Oh yeah. Proceeds to sit there for 15 minutes doing nothing because he doesn't know his password. I'm usually pretty gentle when I fire someone. He wanted to argue he was computer literate during his termination meeting. You keep using that word. Edit. I ran a call center. Incoming and outgoing calls. Turn on 3 programs. Hit the button and everything works automatically. Pretty simple. We hire a lot of felons because we think society gives them a raw deal when they get out. Turns out some of these guys are felons for a reason and deserve a raw deal. This guy was early to mid 30s. Had been a mortgage broker before getting arrested for killing a neighbor. Turns out he didn't kill his neighbor, at least the state couldn't prove he did, but he still ended up doing 2 years waiting for trial. The other employees refused to help him after the first week because he would ask the same questions every day. The exact same question. He would ask me and I'd look at the rest of the phone room like, are you kidding me? Is this a prank? This has to be a prank, right? Do you have a condition where you forget everything every night? It took me 3 weeks to go through all the performance improvement plan steps to fire him. But basically I wanted to fire him on day 3. I knew I done goofed. A friend of mine works at a construction recruitment agency and recently told me a great story. His colleague got a phone call in the office from a client, the foreman of a large construction site, who immediately began to scream at him to come to the site and collect a laborer from the agency who was on his first day working there. It transpired that this young, chavvy temp had left the tracked excavator he was supposed to be operating to find the foreman and demand a socket set to remove the excavator's seat. As he dropped his phone under it and couldn't reach it, the foreman told him to duck off and get back to work, and that he could try to retrieve his phone at the end of the day once he was off the clock. Phones weren't allowed on site anyway. After a shouting match, the laborer stormed off, climbed into the neighboring excavator and used its bucket to rip the cab off his machine to get to his phone. Needless to say, the agency took him off its books. I give out a daily summary of unresolved cases and new cases yet to be answered. I handwrite some notes on it as well. On her second day, she asked why her score went down. Confused, I asked her what she meant. Yesterday I got a 10/12 but today only 10/13. The date. Got drunk at a company dinner and propositioned 2 young female interns. Fired him the next day. He antagonized every single female coworker. It was like his only way of communicating with anybody of the opposite sex was to be demeaning and constantly using facetious tones to undermine them. Luckily, these weren't the reserved gals he was used to at his private college. He learned this the hard way after making a joke about one of the senior members' lunch being too small and to eat a sandwich. She barked back and he did not return the next day. I didn't directly hire him, but we once had a new employee shadow me since I was the stock manager, and on day one he bragged to me about how much coke he had done the night before. The store manager was about 5 feet away and I simply looked over the new guy's shoulder and shook my head. He was gone soon after. Edit. Didn't expect this to get any attention, so I'll throw in some more context. He wasn't immediately let go because at the time we really needed the seasonal help, but even so it only took a couple shifts of being late and smelling like pot for him to be dealt with. I used to work retail relatively close to a college town, so it's not unusual to have employees hungover etc. I had just assumed that was the case. Mentioned in small talk that I myself was a little hungover, and he just stops and goes, "Oh dude, let me tell you about this party," and continued on into his cook extravaganza of a night. Throughout the day he had been making frequent trips to the bathroom and told me it was because his nose kept bleeding. I now knew why. Several months later he came back to reapply for his old job because the store was under new management. I don't think he realized that I was part of that new management, or he had assumed I was just cool with it. I wasn't do half-assed his job regardless of the drugs. I also have reason to believe he snuck off on his lunch break to smoke pot. I don't have a problem with it. I'm a bit of a stoner myself, but I just don't bring it to work. What's the company policy on fighting? He was totally serious too. When told he can't, he asked what about in the parking lot? Entered the clean room without the proper attire, so we had to stop production and bleach about 6 rooms. He was union, so I didn't really have a choice in hiring him, but luckily was able to make sure he was not retained in our department. I once worked with someone who was an absolute waste of space. My boss said he was going to promote him. I told him not, it's a bad idea. After 3 months of training the guy became a manager. Then on his first shift alone stole all the cash from the day's sales. I wasn't even mad. I smiled when my boss told me. I hired someone for a moving company I was with 7 years ago, based near Milwaukee, WI. On his first day he was supposed to take the company car and drive to Madison, WI. He didn't show up. Fired him on the way to his job. Downloaded and stole all of our email company info and prices and took them to the competitor. We sued the shit out of him and won, though. I didn't hire them, thankfully, but I did work at a call center with a couple that got hired into different divisions. He went to work in sales, and she went into customer service. This isn't all that unusual by itself. What happened next though? Their plan from the start was to see how quickly each of them could get let go after they'd started their medical benefits, which kicked in around the 90-day mark. So they were both fairly exemplary. During that time, they both began talking to co-workers in their divisions about their off-work time, internet habits, etc. Eventually they started canvassing their respective divisions with business cards advertising their porn site and inviting people to join. Apparently they did this pretty frequently. Get a job to get medical insurance, then plot to get let go so they could draw unemployment and continue to keep medical insurance going via Cobra. In the meantime, they'd get as many of their doctor and dental visits as they could scheduled. Then, they'd drum up interest in their porn cam site, because by then they'd have gotten to know a ton of people. And who doesn't want to see the hot girl guy at the office having sex? They were both very attractive. Even the managers involved in this clusterfuck of a plan had to admit that the angles on all this were exceptionally slick. And because Phoenix is rife with call centers, they were able to work their way up and down a certain area of town without any of the respective businesses becoming the wiser. Ran an in-home senior care business. Hired a chick and she got a sweet ass gig. 9-5. Steady work. Great easygoing family and easily cared for elderly lady. All she had to do was wear scrubs, not tank tops and shorty shorts. That's it. One weekend was when that changed. We also found out that she brought a catalog of stuff to sell to the person she was caring for. Ended up selling her like $500 worth of it. Luckily we were able to stop it in time. Only person we ever had to actually fire. Everyone else lost their client or just quit. Asked me permission to use the bathroom every time. In spite of my protestations that he was an adult who I trusted to make his own decisions about going to the lav. He also sent me a weekly spreadsheet of all his breaks, potty and otherwise. lunches, and arrival and departure times. This is in no way required or the norm in our workplace. Finally, after multiple pleas from me, he stopped doing that. He was very smart and very skilled, but this was the first indication that he would otherwise be a lot of work. On his second day, responded to an email complaint about our customer service. My boss told him to respond to the email. He responded by pretty much telling the customer off, without having anyone read or approve of it first. It didn't last very long. My mum hired her, but I fired her. Mum needed a website and didn't want to wait for me to set it up. I already had a domain, hosting, graphics, and WP theme, so it needed maybe 4 hours of work, but I was busy. She decided to hire some lady to do it. Capital K, whatever. I email the lady and give her the login info and FTP access of the stuff. She emails my mum a week later, saying I got a broken theme and she'll need to build a new one from scratch. She'll charge hourly, but my mum will get a discount because she understands kids messing up, meaning me. I immediately go in, kill all of her access, and change passwords. I have the next day off and plan on doing it then. Lady emails me a few hours later saying she can't log in or access the materials. Did something happen? I tell her off. Let her know I've looked at her resume and she just stole it from other people and put her name on it. Seriously. The code comments still showed credit to the actual creators. That I've blocked her completely, and that her help is no longer needed. I CC my mum, then call her to explain in more detail. Mum proceeds to be furious with me for being rude to this scam itch, until I get her site up and running the next day. Look, no broken theme. Mum never apologized, but she also stopped calling out my rude behavior and even seems oddly proud of my assertiveness now. We hired a bench technician to do electronics repair. The first job I asked his help with was to extend a comb cable. 3 conductors. Easy peasy. Cut the cable. Splice an X amount of new wire. Done. He comes back to me an hour later with the original cable, cut in 2, then spliced back together, without adding anything to it. Instead of extending it, all he did was cut it and put it back together, and it took him an hour. A company my mom worked in, begged for a job, was told job demanded flexibility time-wise from his side. First Friday he informed his superior that he would now leave, after working for an hour, because there was a football match that he wanted to see and left. Obligatory not me, but this bloke shows up on his first day. The foreman has a picture on his phone of a girl he's showing the guys. New guy proceeds, in graphic detail, to say what he'd like to do to the girl. The girl was the foreman's 13-year-old daughter. He was summarily dismissed. For context, it was a pic of her holding up a fish she'd caught. The second time he showed up to work, at a professional office, making high 5 figures, in a mesh shirt. Oh my good buddy Simeon. Got hired right out of school for a basic sales job. 2 weeks in, most of the office is at a convention. I left the office early to finish off the day from home. On me. I am in tech and could work from home no problem. Should not have left him alone. Day finished out and nothing big happens. Following Monday, security stops me as I am walking in the building to ask about what we did to this kid after he got caught. Caught doing what? Well, it turns out Simeon decided to take a break after I left for the day. He went and bought a 6-pack and broke onto the roof of the building to drink beers and tan. We are in an 11-story building. On either side of us are 15+ story buildings. Simeon decided to strip down to his underwear and tan on the roof, drinking beers and smoking joints. Security catches him. He blows smoke in the guard's face and tells him to duck off. Gets kicked off the property. Remember, none of us in the office heard anything about this. Simeon was sick and had worked from home the rest of that week. Eventually the building contacts our HR department, and Simeon is given a warning. He is somehow allowed on the property again and is told he has 2 strikes against him now. He had consistently been showing up over an hour late each day. Next day Simeon shows up at noon for a 9-5 job. He calls in first to see if it is okay to come in. He slept through 6 alarms. Manager says sure, come on in. Simeon arrives and is finally fired on the spot. Craziest hire fire I have ever seen. I had an employee that slept overnight in the office, as he had a fight with his girlfriend, and then he used the fuel card from the company car for going to locations to fix IT equipment, to fill petrol cans, apparently for personal use. Started showing up 5 minutes later every day. I was a lead developer for an organization's HR system using PeopleSoft. I hired a PhD computer science person from Stanford, thinking I had just struck gold. After showing the good doctor our development system, the hire asks, "Why are you working with these toys? They are beneath us." I told that person that this was what we use and got rewarded with a derisive scoff. Fortunately, the person took another job at some think tank shortly after, so I didn't have to deal with that for long. Needless to say, I don't hire purely from educational credentials anymore. He went through an agency, then through my boss, through me for an interview. Couldn't tell. Very well spoken but still broken English. Had the perfect answer for our interview questions. First week he works. He asks some question that literally he answered in the interview. I gave him a pass because I thought maybe he forgot something really specific about the software he was questioning. Over the first month it's disgustingly obvious he lied on his resume and in his interview. We're talking someone who claims to be proficient in Microsoft Office but doesn't know what Excel is for an example. Dude got paid a ton for 4 months of at work. As soon as he got outside he spit a massive loudie in the air and then caught it back into his mouth. Didn't hire this kid but I was his foreman. Day 1 I have him gluing together some PVC pipes using an extremely runny, very toxic purple primer chemical. Safety glasses are mandatory. I look over. He's gluing these pipes directly above his head. Glasses off. And the chemical has a very low viscosity so it's running down the underside of the pipe and about to drop right in his face and eyes. I yell over for him to stop and step away, and explain that he could have been permanently blinded. He proceeds to freak the duck out on me, and yell about how I'm not speaking to him in a respectful manner. I'm ducking flabbergasted at this point, but I calmly tell him that he was in imminent danger, and to get his goddamn glasses on. At this point he's already used up all his strikes with me, but it's not my call. Okay, like a half hour later, despite me trying to keep an eye on him, he comes up to me with his mouth and lips stained with this primer liquid, and he's laughing about how he accidentally got it in his mouth. I'm totally lost for words. I've already explained to him that this it for sure can give you cancer, but he thinks it's a huge joke. Anyway, he lasted a couple months, so many more stories. Finally I just went ballistic on him one day and that was that. When I was training a new 19-year-old girl, I asked her to tell me a little about herself. Huge mistake. She immediately told me that she was about to have her second abortion, that the father was a married 35-year-old and she keyed his car and slashed the tires. And then she told me in detail about her mom catching her sleeping with the guy's brother. I'm so thankful that she recently got fired and I never have to deal with her terrible work ethic or hear about her poor life choices ever again. Started asking me for advice about men. Not just a little. I'm talking detailed advice. Like, I text him this and he texts me that. What does he mean by that? Should I text him back? Do you think he's done with me? Sadly, said employee is not nearly as young as you might guess. New salesperson literally looked out the window and stomped her feet because she was mad her out-of-state boss and the in-state owners were going to a lunch meeting without her. It was her second day. She lasted less than a month. More like, what didn't he do? Which, in his case, was anything he was hired to do. Dude was coasting from day 1. When I confronted him about it, he tried all kinds of bullet deflection tactics. He tried turning it around on me and my poor leadership and saying he felt he was being given conflicting direction between me and another senior member on my team. When things really got bad, he even tried crying in my office about his recently dead father and how he was depressed. Firing that useless tub of it was one of the most satisfying things I ever did. Not the boss, but this guy who worked with me at the car wash ended up stealing a wallet out of the car he was cleaning. He ended up getting caught because he got a pizza delivered to his address that he paid for with a stolen credit card. I have not seen him since. Continue to ask questions that I have already answered. I want people to ask any and every question they have. but please don't make me continue to repeat myself. Supervisor at a hotel in Banff not hiring boss. But, new guy, obviously dumb as rocks, suggested someone walk up mountain in the middle of winter when they asked him what they could do. The mountain was fine to hike, if a bit sketchy in parts, in the summer but would require a lot of skill to summit in the winter. After a week I had our assistant come in to take some papers. When she left he nudged me and said dibs, TF. I hired a guy to update a few of our websites, sat him down, logged him into the system, showed him how to access the various sites and gave him some edits, checked in after an hour, found him with an open tab on HTML tutorial. He hasn't updated anything yet, literally nothing. He said he had a few people stop by to welcome him aboard so he didn't get a chance to do anything yet. I said we need to have this done and that I check back soon. I waited another hour, checked back, watched him peck on the keyboard and he managed to type out a whole line of HTML. I told him we're all set and we went to HR. Not a boss, but an uncle so close enough. We had this kid who married his high school sweetheart then joined the Air Force. In tech school he decides he likes this chick he met online better and proposes to her. When he gets to our base we start helping him set up his house for his wife to get there. During lunch one day he casually tells us that he no longer likes his first wife so he is actually waiting on his new wife and her 2 kids. In case you didn't know, adultery is a crime under the UCMJ. In the 6 months I knew him he proposed to no less than 3 more girls. I didn't hire them, but it was my recommendation, so my boss hired them on the spot. Day 1. 12 p start time for training. Calls in sick at 11:30. I hear from a mutual friend of ours that they'd been playing COD all night, and when I get off work I should join them when they play again. It set the tone for their employment. Worked at a small catering company in college. Got a friend a job bartending at a small wedding. Friend is excited and I'm surprised to find he's a no-call no-show the next day. I call him to ask why he isn't in and in slurred speech goes, "Oh our fraternity was hosting the Olympics at the house and forgot. I'm pretty drunk but I'll be over in 10. He hung up before I could object and I decided I'm not the best judge of character. Told one of my other team members that she had great tits and couldn't stop imagining her lips wrapped around his cock. He got slapped 3 times that day, twice by her, once with a pink slip. My boss loves to tell me the story of a financial analyst he hired a few years ago that was such a disaster he became infamous. As my boss tells it, the guy came in on his first day of work and loudly declared he was the best financial modeler in the state ! 1!11. He was not, in fact, the best financial modeler in the state. My boss knew on this guy's first day in the office that he had made a horrible mistake. All of this guy's financial models, forecasts, and spreadsheets were utter crap. When constructive criticism was made he would argue back that the rest of the corporate finance team didn't know anything about finance and that they clearly didn't see the genius behind his work. It also didn't help that he had 0 social skills and made self-aggrandizing statements that put off all his co-workers. The guy made it only a few months before being summarily fired for poor performance and poor culture fit. Not a boss but I was working at a grocery store in New Zealand, Foursquare, in a small surf town, Raglan. They hired a new kid. He was the son of the chief of police of the town, so he kind of thought he was untouchable. Given how small a town it was, he called out sick on his literal first shift ever, then came in that afternoon with all his mates. Eyes super red and all they bought was booze, drinking age 18 and NZ. I worked produce there and I saw him getting checked out with his mates. I turned to the manager and asked, "Hey, didn't Sam call out sick this morning?" "Yup, and he just came in to buy booze." "What a dumbass. You gonna talk to him about it his next shift?" "Nope, because he isn't getting another shift." Fastest I've ever seen a new employee get fired at any job. 2 days on the job. Got plastered at company Christmas party and made a complete ass of herself. I wasn't the one who hired him, but he reports to me. So 3 days after he started working, he sends out an email to a very important client, and his signature has my position. Needless to say he got into deep with management. I'm not a manager, But I'm very close with two of the hiring managers at my store and they told me that they hired new girl and instantly regretted it when A, she couldn't tell her lefts from her right, and B, when she started witnessing about Sid or Lord and Savior Jesus Christ to other employees. Started crying as soon as the phone rang, saying she couldn't handle it. On his first week, he won a prepaid credit card for performance sales job. Hours after I personally had given him the gift card, one of my managers advises me that he's been smearing his fesses and drawing swastikas with them in the men's washroom. I terminated him. Awkward to say the least. Before it's asked, we had cameras outside the public washrooms that allowed us to identify the person doing it. Edit. Added location of fesses smearing.